frankly, there's a million other things I'd rather talk about in this topic, but I'm going to cover it because it's an important one, and that is post-traumatic stress disorder, how to deal with it and how to survive with it. I'm Mark Wales. I was a troop commander in Afghanistan. I served in the army for a while. I was diagnosed and recovered from PTSD, and I'm going to share my experience with you right here. Just as an introduction, I served for 16 years in the Australian Army. I did a lot of deployments overseas, some in Afghanistan. During one battle in particular, it was 2007, we were involved in heavy combat in the Chora Valley, and I just remember being almost surrounded, very intense fighting. We had a fatality in our team. I was with my patrol, we were stuck in there all day. I wrote about this extensively in a memoir that I wrote, but it was an intense day. It was very traumatic, it was very difficult, and it's not something I've ever forgotten. I continued on with that deployment, but by the time I got home, I realized that something was not quite right with me. I went and locked myself in my apartment when I got home to Perth. I didn't want to come out, didn't want to talk to anyone. I was having nightmares. I was totally isolated and cut off, and it's really uncharacteristic of me. I knew something was wrong. My friends took me out for a drink out on the streets in Perth, and I remember at the end of the night I found myself crying. I was on my own on a street corner, just not feeling great, and for me that was the final straw. I knew something was wrong and I needed help. The next day I went to an army neuroscientist. I spoke to this guy about the symptoms I was facing, and he'd heard this before. He deals with soldiers coming back from Afghanistan, so as I'm explaining these symptoms, that I was withdrawn and didn't feel great and couldn't concentrate, he said to me, look, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Bad news is you've got post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, right? You've been fighting a war, this happens. He goes, the good news is I'm going to show you how to repair it. And he took me through some really basic steps, and they became the foundations of my self-recovery, and I just want to share that with you today. As a disclaimer, I am not a medical professional and I'm not giving you medical advice. Always seek professional help with things like this. Speak to a GP, speak to a doctor or a psychiatrist to get that support that you need. This is just an insight for you, and I hope some of this can give you some ideas about how you might be able to approach this topic if you or your loved ones are dealing with it. Why is this important? It's important because this can affect so many qualities and so many parts of your life. It can wreck your relationships, it can wreck your ability to work, it can really interfere with just your quality of life overall. My recommendation is this is something that can be dealt with. There are treatments you can get and can really help you. And I don't like talking about this because it's personal, but this is something that, even though I'm not proud of it necessarily, I'm very proud of how I recovered from it. What is PTSD? I've got an official explanation for it here, but the crux of it is post-traumatic stress disorder, a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. And an individual, it may affect their mental, physical, social, and or social well-being. Right, so that's all it is. It can really affect your well-being, but there are ways to deal with it. And it can include all sorts of people. I'm a soldier, but if natural disasters, first responders, violent crimes, all these things can create exposure to trauma and create these issues. My experience with PTSD came from being in combat in the army. I experienced those symptoms when I got home. I knew something was wrong. It really threatened my identity because I'm a soldier. I'm meant to be in control. And all of a sudden, I had no control over my mind, which was quite worrying. But when I started to recognize the problem and then went and sought help for it, including psychotherapy, that was the start of my recovery. I'm just going to share 3 steps with you now. I think they're going to be helpful. If you or someone you know encounters this problem, maybe you can help them. The 3 steps for recovery I have. Step number 1, seek diagnosis from a medical professional. This is the most important step, I think. I think going and getting that diagnosis, getting the facts behind what you're actually dealing with, this will help you calibrate whatever treatment they get. Professionals will give you advice on that treatment. Stick with that. I went and saw I think it was a psychiatrist, and he gave me that diagnosis. And straight away we had options, right? There were psychotherapy options they can give you which can lower your symptoms straight away. Get diagnosed, make sure you know the facts. I would probably share that diagnosis with some trusted people, close family, close friends, whoever you want, but just you want to build a team of people that are willing to help you out. I shared this with a couple of friends of mine. Wasn't something I wanted to share widely. I shared it with a few really close mates, and they were great about it, and it felt like quite a weight off my shoulders, and they were always supportive, but they were in my corner from that point on. This first step of seeking diagnosis is a big step because you're on your way to recovery. You know something's wrong, you've got unusual symptoms, you're on your way to recovery. So always get a medical professional in this first step. Step 2, practice self-care. So when I went and saw that neuroscientist, he said to me, look, bad news is you got PTSD and depression. Good news is I'm going to show you how to fix it, and we're just going to do 3 things. We're going to eat a bit better, we're going to exercise more, and we're going to get some rest. And I thought, that sounds really simple. And he goes, no, listen, what's happened is you've been overusing a really ancient part of your brain. It's your amygdala, controls all your fight and flight mechanisms. Because you've been overusing that since you've been fighting in combat, and you've been underusing the more advanced part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex. Controls all your executive functioning, your logic, your empathy, your reasoning. At the moment, you're a bit cooked. You're probably more lizard than you are human. I said, that's not true. And he said, look, we're just going to recalibrate your body and your mind, and we're going to do this kind of self-care routine. Exercise, I want you to get about 120 minutes a week, moderate to vigorous levels of training. That's going to really improve your overall mood and cognition. I said, yeah, that's cool. I can do that. He said, with diet, we're going to clean your diet up. You're going to get lean meats, leafy greens, you cut out your sugar and your alcohol. Again, that's going to support your whole system and just help you improve. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then with rest, he said to me, you're going to get 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. No excuses. And to do that, we're going to give you a bedtime routine. It's going to take you 20 minutes. You're going to basically unwind for the day. You're going to have a shower, you're going to stretch for a bit, you're going to write in a diary about your day. Read a fiction book and go to sleep. That's how we're going to calm your mind down from the day. So you're going to get better quality sleep for longer. I followed this pretty basic routine, which everyone knows they're just day-to-day good habits to have. But as I followed it, I noticed a small improvement. So with this self-care plus psychotherapy, this was an important part of my recovery. So practice that self-care, especially diet, exercise, and rest. And for bonus points, if you can get a really good sense of purpose and some socialization as well, that will go a long way to helping you. And top tip here, you can actually combine some of these together in one. So I started a sport, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and lo and behold, that gave me a more socialization, gave me the exercise piece. Then my sleeping started to improve, my eating improved a bit more, and it also gave me a sense of purpose. Just one of these one of these good habits can build in a few of these benefits at once. And over time, as I was doing this, I took up boxing and CrossFit, and I did a bit of surfing. I noticed myself improving over time, and it was just consistent application of these basic self-care measures really helped a lot. Took me a couple of years, really. I was back at work within a few months, but it took me a couple of years of doing this to kind of bring my system back into balance. But it worked. It worked. And if you want to know more about this layering of your resilience, I'd strongly recommend The Resilience Shield. It's a great book written by some mates of mine who are also top soldiers in the SAS. They've written a really great book about some of the science behind these resilience habits. So definitely check that out. It's a great book. So that's 2. And number 3, I would say execute, recover, and repeat. Right? This is going to be a process. You're just going to be following this kind of rinse and repeat process for a long time. So the idea is you're not going to get all these habits all the time, but you just want to try and get it the bulk of the time and try and get most of the habits each day. You don't have to be too draconian about it, but just get it right most of the time, and you'll see small improvements every day, and you've got to do this for a long time. It takes patience, it takes persistence, and you will need to give yourself as much time as you need to try and recover this and go back to your professional team as much as you need to. Keep the support of your family as much as you need to. And there is a way out of this by just applying yourself and giving yourself these basic tips. So that's my advice. They're my 3 steps. Seek diagnosis, practice self-care, execute, recover, repeat as much as you need to until you find yourself in a better place. I get a lot of questions about whether this still affects me. What I tell people is if I don't take care of those resilience layers, if I deplete my reserves quite a bit, then yes, some of those symptoms are waiting for me. And the reason I think this is so important is because these are not just things you can do for recovery from mental health episodes. They are the pillars of high performance. These are things that will give you the buffer you need, the resilience you need to get through those shocks that come along in life. And this is not just about work, being able to work better. It's about maintaining good relationships. It's about having enjoyment in your life. You don't want to be stuck in a hole where you've just got this condition that affects you all the time. So this is an important one. It's a difficult topic for me to talk about. It's very personal. It's not something I'm proud of, at least from a kind of non-rational perspective, but I am really proud of how I kind of dealt with this and recovered from it. And the benefit of this is if you have been through an experience like the one I've been through, it gives you a great perspective on life later on. And there is a huge degree of growth that comes from it. So if you can recover, if you can stick it out, there are great things waiting for you on the other side. I hope this helps. Again, I hope it's given you some great insights, and stick around for my next video because this topic also overlaps with high performance habits. It's really just an extension of what I've talked about. So please stick around, and I wish you all the best and good luck with this topic.